still doing what you're doing, and you've got some great new research to share. And wow, I mean, we connected, I think, when now you're much more attuned, of course, to the field of geoengineering and climate change, and of course the chemicals, the phrase that's widely abused, I think, on many levels by many folks, chemtrails, which is an Air Force, U.S. Air Force term.
Right.
It's not a theory, and so you're much more attuned to that space than I am. But Elana, I don't know if you remember the first time we talked, but I started doing my programs and my interviews, and I've got my book that's going to be published now by Trying Day here in a couple months, coming out. I started doing what I do from Miami because of the Zika virus. That was 2016, the fall of 2016. 3 years later, of course, and now we're a year and a half into it. We've got this global virus, this pandemic, COVID-19, this another coronavirus.
Right.
I mean, so so we want to, of course, it's a pleasure to have you rejoin the program, and I'd like to obviously have you discuss your new research. Maybe we can tie some things together here on what's happening. And how are you?
Oh, I'm well. I'm just in the writing mode where, not sleeping well, lots of things on my mind. You know the drill for writing a book. It just sort of takes over everything. And it's been 2 years I've been working on this book, and I'm on the last chapter. And it's huge, and it couldn't have been better timed, this COVID event for me, because I've been able to go on the internet and listen to many doctors and PhDs about their insights into what this really is. And it's, therefore I'm way off schedule. I should have been done at least 3 or 4 months ago, but I'm now approaching the end, and it's the hardest book I've ever written. And I don't know if you know, Ian, but I ghostwrite books for people too. I've been a ghostwriter for many years. And this is, I've probably written over a dozen books, and this is definitely the hardest book I've ever written.
Wow, that says something. Now, for listeners, the book that Elana is almost completing here, is working on completing. I think you've got just a chapter left that you're scheduled to write here. The book is called, that'll be available soon, Geoengineered Transhumanism: How the Environment Has Been Weaponized by Chemicals, Electromagnetics, and Nanotechnology for Synthetic Biology. This is we're living the future right now. This is it. And Elana, you're really bringing things together. But also for listeners who perhaps may not be familiar with your name, you have historically, you were well achieved academically out of high school, whereas I think it was it in high school that you were invited to the White House in D.C. and you met JFK and some of these good players at the day.
Yes, I was 16 years old, and I went to Girls Nation, and at that same summer, Bill Clinton was at Boys Nation, and there were 100 of us, 50 girls, 50 boys, in the Rose Garden with President Kennedy near the end of our week, in which we did mock government. I had spent the entire week with Lyndon Baines Johnson herding my group of girls around. And boy, he's a really sleazy character. At that time, I don't think I knew the word sleazy, but I certainly felt it. And then about 3-4 months later, President Kennedy was murdered on television, and I had to go and give talks to the civic groups that had paid for my trip to Washington about that day with Kennedy, when he alluded to me during the time in the Rose Garden. We were only there maybe an hour, and he alluded to how much like his wife I looked. And at that time, I did look a lot like Jackie Kennedy. So it was a huge political moment for me. I think that was my awakening, was his murder And then, of course, the 60s generation, my generation, and all the mayhem that was going on then. I was thinking last night how like child's play it looks compared to what we're under now. And yet it was how I came of age, yes.
Now, the under an ionized sky is was your previous. Well, I think you've had a book in between that, but one of the main book released by you, from chemtrails to space fence lockdown. That was 2014. Is that right?
Right. Both books were published by Farrell House, and the Chemtrails HARP and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth was the first book in 2014. And then in 2018, Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown came out. And each one, each book, I mean, you know how this works as a writer. Each book sort of gives birth to a whole bunch of new ideas that then give birth to yet another book. And I I promise you this, Ian, this is the last book, the one I'm finishing now, that I will write on geoengineering. I By the end of this book, in this trilogy I've written, I will have said everything that I am qualified to say. I have tried to paint the very large picture of how the environment has been set up. And I use that term advisedly, set up consciously, intentionally, as the means by which we will be under space fence lockdown. And that has to do with the military doctrine of full spectrum dominance. But what I didn't know when I was writing those other books was that full spectrum dominance didn't just mean to completely control the atmosphere, the planet, in a physical way, but also in a cultural, psychological way. I knew that because the CIA is involved in this and they are always concerned about culture. But what I didn't realize was that the microbiology part of this would be part of also the dominance, the full spectrum dominance over the miniature world, the microbe world by which we all live here on planet Earth. I mean, we're just surrounded and completely infused with microbes, and we've been conditioned to think of them as harmful, as a threat, as an enemy with germ warfare, and the idea of the virus, the idea of the bacteria. And and what I didn't realize is that all that conditioning we've undergone, not only is it false, but it is used to control and profit from our lack of health. And our health in America has been diminishing steadily over the last, over my lifetime. I mean, basically, over the last 50 years that I've been watching and observing, analyzing and figuring out what the heck is going on here in America where I was born.
Where is this being driven from, Elana? Is this an American uh, conception? Is this outside of America? Is America a player in it? To give listeners an idea of really what's kind of happening with space lockdown, and there's and I hadn't known this prior, Elana, but you talk about a synthetic sun. For instance, the Chinese actually have a synthetic sun. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure, that's just it's called the solar simulator. And we have a lunar simulator as well, and it isn't just China. The United States has one. I don't know. I haven't checked lately to see how many nations have it, but it is an LED-driven mirror refractory reflecting device that is basically sent up by rocket and completely constructed in the troposphere, I assume. I don't think it's in the stratosphere, and it has a variety of functions. I mean, sometimes people even see it, right? I mean, they go, "What? I see two suns in the sky," but you can tell the difference between our natural sun and the solar simulator. The solar simulator is LED driven, and so the light from it is white. And you'll also see that there's no firm boundary to it. It sort of just sort of splays out as a sort of light event in the sky. Whereas our sun, our natural star, it gives out a beautiful golden light and has a perimeter that is you can see without damaging your eyes.
Right. What is the well, how many, again, my original question, I think, was where does this really incept? And I want you to address CERN, what's going on at CERN in Switzerland for listeners. We can segue into that in a bit. But what is how many suns are in this troposphere, or how many suns are we talking about?
Well, it seems to me that they're not just putting it up there to make more light or to take the place of the sun, though you will notice, and I have this in this next book, because of course, as usual in every book, I go back over the environment and what has happened since the previous book to the fun and games, the magician show in our atmosphere, because again, I remind you, our atmosphere is ionized. And what that means is it's plasma loaded and very useful for even theatrical movie screen type things. And in a way, that's what the solar simulator is used for, is there seems to be something that they want to hide from us from time to time. And they being, that would be NASA in the United States, that would be the ESA in Europe, that would be any number of space organizations that are in on what Catherine Austin Fitts and the dark journalist call the secret space program. And there is a real secret space program going on. I mean, I can't imagine being so naive that people would think they would be open about what is going on, because of course space too is being weaponized. So this solar simulator seems to blot out our sun from time to time. You can see this in a variety of videos if you just search, or if you read the chapter in which I go into this in this next book. You can see some people have discovered these cameras that are around the Earth that are on 24/7 and are also running on the internet. You can see the footage. Now and then the footage is changed. Something's been clipped out that the powers that be don't want you to see. But generally speaking, you can see that the solar simulator is activated in part to hide something. And what is that something? Well, of course, some people are going to say it's Nibiru. Some people are going to say it's an incoming planet, whatever. I'm not sure, but I kind of go with the idea that there may actually be a sphere being formed in the, I guess I would say it's in the troposphere, but at the very edge of the stratosphere too. And what is this thing? Well, I think it might be made of nuclear material, such as plutonium. And I posit that in this book because that seems to me to make the most sense, that a lot of the radiation that's escaping from our nuclear silos and even the detritus that comes from this so-called clean energy. It actually has a form, and if it is invisible at this level, it would take on a form if it was treated with plasma. So it's just a theory, Ian, but I know that the solar simulator is used for purposes of hiding something, along with probably a whole lot of other things.
Ilana, is it a conspiracy theory, or is it simply a scientific theory?
I think this is what I'm saying is pretty scientific. I mean, think about my position. I'm writing about national security programs, which definitely geoengineering is. They make it seem like it's open, and since President Trump entered office in 2017, it was announced again as something that we're doing solar radiation management, or whatever the latest acronym is, and we're being open about it now. We have to do this because of climate change, global warming, whatever term they're using, which I consider all of which a ruse to cover over the secret space program and the many, many, many operations going on in the sky. Conspiracy theory, yes, there is a conspiring that has gone on here, but how much do Americans need to know about what NASA and NOAA and all the rest are doing? I tend to think, because of the biological aspect and also the mind control aspects of this technology, uh, Americans deserve to know. So I spend a lot of time. It's not the kind of book, you can't write a book about national security issue that's still active, that has not been declassified. You can't go to a library and read 10 bestsellers on the issue. You have to sort of scotch tape it together yourself if you have that kind of a mind, which I do, and if you're a good spot on researcher and able to find the papers, the patents, the conferences, the interviews, the whatever, in order to understand how this technology really works. And that's what I do. It seems to be something I'm driven to do because it bothers me greatly. One, that our First Amendment rights are now almost gone, and that at the same time science is going on right in front of us, but it's being weaponized and therefore hidden. And Americans have really lost the ability to think things through. They've lost confidence in themselves. They wait for experts to speak, experts who are often either colluding with this secret science, or are simply maybe threatened and remain quiet because of potential danger. I mean, this is the realm of national security, and it's not the same as what most people live, and I understand that. But I, as a regular person, as a citizen, I watch my P's and Q's, because I realize I'm treading on territory that is a bit dangerous, you might say. But I think that the fact that I'm just a person, no PhD, I have a master's in historiography, but otherwise I have no lovely letters after my name in science or physics or anything. And I simply work with my mind and with what I'm able to find and the patterns that I see arising. And so far, I have to say that 10 years in the geoengineering movement, where I've been really obsessively going after everything, I have to say I've never been wrong yet.
Ilana, I tend to agree with you. There's definitely a conspiracy here now, and it's surfacing on many levels. We have perhaps the most blatant attack on our civil rights, as you're speaking of in any time in history, um, I, I started on the trail I started on because of a guy named Dr. Sutton, Anthony Sutton out of Stanford. And last week, I hosted the editor of Technocracy.news, Patrick Wood, who co-wrote a book with Dr. Sutton before he passed away. And I happen to agree with you. Dr. Sutton had written a book called the Federal Reserve Conspiracy, not Theory. Now, you simply mentioned theory because you're talking about things that, again, as you say, are really beyond your ability to talk about, which I think is why you're suggesting this is your last book. However, let's talk about. Well, let me just throw this out at you. Let me just throw this out at you, Elana, and then I want to get into CERN. Is the phrase or the word extraterrestrial involvement, is that simply let's say a CIA opt, whereas it's something that is perhaps possibly planned to roll out to control the masses, as is this mask wearing business and these vaccine business to control masses? This is my opinion. Or is, from any of your research, is there involvement? I mean, people say, in God we trust. So you say God. Well, God doesn't live on the planet. God lives somewhere else, whatever God is. So that would be extraterrestrial in that sense. So an extraterrestrial presence is widely accepted when applied to a term or a name or a concept like God. I hope you're staying with me in that. Is anywhere in your research, or do you go to one side or the other in regards to this concept of extraterrestrial involvement? Is there any validity to something like that actually existing, or is it again possibly just a phrase used for some type of a planned or possible planned CIA type involvement to control the masses?
Well, you know that term, first of all, I've never heard it used in relationship to God, by the way, but that term is so loaded, and that's what we have to think of is the CIA. They're really very clever, and they're the authors of the term conspiracy theory, of course. They dragged that out and gave it a new shine after John Kennedy's assassination, just to start shutting people up who could see through the ruse of what they were involved in. But I think the term extraterrestrial, I don't ever use that term because it's so loaded. It's been saddled with so much weight that is amorphous and anomalous and sort of isn't there but is, and it's just too loaded. But I know what you're getting at, and let me say this: the Clifford Carnicom, the independent scientist that I'm good friends with and have worked with over the last 10 years regarding the geoengineering issue, from my vantage point, he's the true scientist. He used to work for Department of Defense. He worked for Bureau of Land Management as a scientist, and he left all that and went on his own. And he really is primarily responsible for just about everything that we began to wake up to after Nick Begich's book, Angels Don't Play This Harp, came out in 1995. That said, Clifford came up with 7 operations that he believes geoengineering is involved in, not just weather engineering. There are 7 operations, and the 7th is using the clouds, this cloud cover of plasma clouds. These are not moisture clouds that we normally have. Any type of cloud can now be built with plasma, electromagnetics, and chemicals. So he posited that there's a final operation in which the clouds are being used to either detect or hide sophisticated technology. And, this would be going back to NASA having stuff up there like the TR-3A, I believe it's called, and the Aurora was a triangular ship. And I think this is accurate. I think that there are ships or craft hiding in some of these clouds. They can even produce their own plasma, and people have caught it on camera. So there's that. But there's a much for the word extraterrestrial. The thing that appeals to me is that if someone, and there are many someones doing this now, who have positions of authority during this COVID operation, we've seen some of these people. We've seen them in the Disclosure Project, which wants to bring out all the UFO type of information that the U.S. Air Force and other branches of the military have kept secret and classified. If any of these people who are involved in this give up their humanity, and I can't define that for you. I don't know. Maybe you see, I'm pretty sure you probably see human beings as differently than I do. But there is something unique about human beings, despite the fact that there are many people who want to basically poo-poo humanity and looking forward to enhancing human weakness, etc., with transhumanism. I'm not one of those people. I see that there is something unique in the human being that is divine. And I can't prove it in a court of law. I can't put it under a microscope. But I'm in my lifetime have met a handful of people who I would say are great, great human beings. And they are very varied. They do not have necessarily PhDs. They do not necessarily have a big income. There's something about them that just is what every human being, a quality every human being who wants to be truly human would desire and might even model on. So that's, if you abandon that, then there's a law of nature that takes over. And that law is nature abhors a vacuum. And that vacuum inside that human being will be filled by something. And that something is not just an idea. It doesn't have flesh as we think of it, but it does have some sort of entity presence, which might be plasma. I don't know what it's made of, but it is real. It's just that with our very tiny aperture into the electromagnetic spectrum, which, as you know, when you look at what's visual there, you're going, wow, we can hardly see anything. We can't see into infrared, we can't see gamma rays, we can't see into radio waves. We are just tiny, tiny, tiny. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist in one of these other bands of frequency. So I think if I were to vote for extraterrestrial, and that's why you want to talk about CERN, I'm sure, is there are ways to invite those entities into one's human psyche, body, subtle bodies, whatever you want to talk about, whichever level of frequency you want to talk about. They come in and they fill that vacuum, and suddenly you're not you anymore. And the rumor now about the PCR test, I think that's the initials, I haven't memorized it, that there is something in this whole event going on of push, push, push for the vaccine, push, push, push for the test, that may actually qualify our humanity. And a lot of people may laugh at that, but could you chemically produce something? And particularly now that we have nanotechnology, which is hugely important, hugely. I'm almost writing an entire book about nanotechnology. If you had that going on, could you cross that barrier between the physics of the body and the metaphysics of the humanity? Could you cross over and impact the metaphysics of humanity? Yes, I believe you could.
There's a guest that has joined my program frequently over the years, and he's got a PhD. Happens to have a PhD in humanities, and from Oxford. And I mentioned to him on one of the previous recent times he joined the program.
Was it Joseph? Is it Joseph?
No.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. Joseph Farrell.
Oh,
I'm a big fan of his. Yes.
Yeah. No. It's not Joseph. His name is JP, the fellow I'm talking about. But I mentioned a school at Oxford that is considered to be, if not it's one of the most prestigious, if not the most prestigious academic institutions to get into at Oxford, and it's called All Souls School.
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
And I think Cecil Rhodes had left the majority of his trust to it, and anyway, so he was familiar. He was caught up guard a little bit that I'd gone into dialogue, just touching on the basis of that. Let's get into CERN, Elana, because in this kind of a world of a technocratic realization, a thread, if you will, for listeners, thread in what's happening with COVID-19. I think more and more Americans are kind of waking up and saying, it's pardon the use of that term, but they're kind of getting up in the morning and saying, I'm looking at a different world that is now slapping me right in the face than I was living just a couple of years ago. I mean, the world is changed so dramatically. Tie in, if you can, if you will, COVID-19 into what you know is happening at CERN, and then talk a little bit about smart dust.
Well, you don't want any small talk here, do you? I mean, truthfully, Ian, I am not keeping track of CERN right now. CERN has been closed for a couple of years. They're making it even bigger. And it may be because of what China is doing, where it too is creating a massive particle accelerator. Everything, of course, that China does is massive. But I do want to address what it has done, because in a way, would we be living in this different type of time? And I use the term advisedly, had it not been for CERN. I used to be friends with Anthony Patch, and he was my go-to man for anything CERN. And Anthony was very, very helpful to me to get an idea of CERN so that I could write, I think it's chapter 8 in my Under an Ionized Sky. I have a chapter entitled The Temple of CERN. And it's well worth reading that one chapter, particularly for you, because you're very interested in CERN. And that was the period when CERN was highly active, and it became evident when I understood what the D-Wave computer, it's a quantum adiabatic computer, and you may have heard Geordie. I can't remember Geordie's last name, but he's the chief technical officer at D-Wave. D-Wave is up in British Columbia, just north of me. Geordie actually came out and said a couple of things regarding his bottomless respect for the D-Wave computer, which requires having a part of it in an environment so cold that it's actually 3 degrees colder, as I recall, than outer space. And that cold feature attracted my attention because I'm familiar with some things that absolutely need cold temperature and can't really be in this level of reality if it's any warmer. So the D-Wave computer runs, I don't know about now, but at that time it did. It ran everything having to do, all the software, all the decision making regarding what was happening with the magnetosphere above the Earth. And the magnetosphere is sort of surrounding our ionosphere and all the other spheres, plasmasphere, et cetera, all the way down to our little troposphere, the teeny weeny little edge we have around the Earth. And D-Wave was making all those decisions, and it was obvious to me that they were opening what we call portals. They were opening doors to other dimensions. And to most people, this sounds science fiction. But of course, the military, I don't know how many dimensions they've discovered now, but it used to be, when I paid attention, it was 12. So there are obviously many dimensions going on. We're sort of perceiving reality now as sort of an onion with various layers. And you can, there are people who can see through that, I suppose, people who have psychic abilities, but you can also see through it with mathematics, and you can see through it now with some of the devices that have been invented, or at least brought forward after having been invented probably a long time ago. And that's to me what CERN was doing, was it was opening gates for entities that Geordie referred to as the old ones, and now we're in a zone that is particularly strange, for the old ones to come in. Now, did that happen? I think it did. And I think the reason our atmosphere is completely different than it was before geoengineering began two decades plus ago. Completely different, because they have treated it with chemicals, heat, resonance, all manner of things. When I say they, we're talking NASA, we're talking CERN, we're talking all the different ionospheric heaters like HARP. All of this has been about full spectrum dominance over our planet for the secret space program. All this has been going on. Now, did they know that they were releasing the old ones? I think they did, because there were several rituals that I discuss in that chapter in Under an Ionized Sky. There were several rituals performed at CERN, which is on the border of Switzerland and France, as you know. And it's a very geomagnetically active area. They chose that area for the particle accelerator, not because the land was cheap, but because they wanted that geomagnetic current, what some people call ley lines, whatever you want to call it, where it's super, super active and is itself a gateway. And that's the value of CERN. And I do need to get back to CERN simply for my own interest. But I am quite familiar with that period when I was more in touch with Anthony Patch.
And how does it tie into this virus and what seems to be apparently an attempt with integration with human genome, and as you're writing about in this new book, the transhumanism. I hope that's not too broad of a stroke.
No, it is connected, but it's an odd connection. Now, did we, Ian, say the last time I was with you that I'm a student of Rudolf Steiner?
That name does sound familiar, Elana. I think you mentioned that.
Right. Well, I was a Waldorf teacher for years, and I helped to found several Waldorf schools. And Steiner also was involved in many, many things. And one of them was occult, esoterics regarding various levels of reality here around being a human being on the planet, etc. So, I've been 40 some years in that. And what I see is that the global elites who are behind all of this COVID-19 event, and I purposely call it an event because, as you know, there are many doubts about what it really is and what it really isn't. And we don't need to go into that. But the global elites who are behind this event, this global event, are very much, the ones at the top anyway, not all of them, the ones at the top are esotericists of their own, in their own right. And they follow the planets, they follow and when you say the planets, I'm not talking about newspaper astrology. We're talking about the frequencies, the vibrations. Now we all know that reality is really basically a matter of frequency. And so they follow all that. They have the money and the power to employ a lot of people who are very good at what they do in order to discover every nuance you can imagine regarding the transformation of the earth and of humanity. And I say humanity, are they as concerned about animals? No, they're not. Their major concern is the human being, because the human being, as I told you, is a very unique being, despite the bad press that the worst of us get. There is something about the human being which is extraordinary. Rudolf Steiner goes so far as to say that humanity is the religion of the gods. And I really like that, because what makes us special is not that we're nice or that we have brains, or it has to do with our free will. And the development of free will and taking responsibility for one's free will, these are very unique things about the human being. So what these global elites want is they want a non-free will human being. They want a hive mind human being. And that's where this COVID-19, in my opinion, and I have a long chapter on this, so you'll be able to read it if you so wish, is the COVID-19 event is about getting the final touch of this environmental weaponization that has basically changed our atmosphere, therefore changed the air we're breathing, therefore changed our blood, because it goes in through our lungs, goes into our blood, goes beyond the blood-brain barrier. All of this is loaded to the beyond the belief of trillions and trillions and trillions of nanoparticles, some of which are natural, many of which are genetically engineered to be the internal network by which we will be controlled from outside. And meanwhile, we're breathing in more, trillions more every day, because as we know, the jets that are flying and the rockets that are the sounding rockets that are heading up to take satellites up or take weather readings or whatever they're doing, all of them are spewing more and more, not just from the engine chamber, but from supplementary systems, spewing more and more and more biological, chemical entities that we call nanobots, nanorobots, all of which have tiny, tiny microcomputers in them and are in touch with what I call the laptop boys, that are collecting all the biometrics that these entities are taking notice of. And there's a lot of nanosensors on every level you can possibly imagine. We are now hosting these entities. And were we ever asked if we wanted to be doing this? No, we were not. We were not asked because the global elites see that they own not just the planet, but all of the inhabitants as well, and can do with them as they bloody well please, either openly or covertly. So that's kind of why not kind of, that's why I have really studied this COVID-19 thing, so that I can understand that they are putting the software in us now for running this whole network that has been already built. It began with Morgellons long ago when Clifford Carnicom was studying what was coming down as precipitation, and in his HEPA filter, the fibers, the filaments that he eventually was able to break into, mostly chemically, and find what that polymer filament was carrying. And it was carrying what goes by the common name of Morgellons, which is not a very good term. It has, because and that, I'm going to cover that again too. I covered it in the last chapter of the first book, Clifford's work, and now I'm returning to it under the umbrella of nanotechnology, because that's exactly what it is. It is nanotechnology that has built a fiber optics, maybe without the optics, network in our bodies, because it replicates. It has some people are suffering greatly from the Morgellons. As you know, they have lesions. They have wires sticking out of the lesions that are highly sensitive to electromagnetics. All of this has been done purposely to be able to transmute the human 1.0, as Dr. Carrie Maget calls it, to a 2.0 human being, or a singularity human being, a robotic brain-computer interface, BCI human being. And I make the case that it all began with the chemtrails, and actually it began before that with radiation, making sure that the 3 bombs went off back in 45, and the atmosphere was transformed at that point as well, hugely. And the air we breathed was transformed as well, and goes on and on and on with half-lives of radiation. And then they gave it a little boost with Fukushima, thanks to the HARP, ionospheric heater. And the story goes on, Ian. I mean, how big is this story? This is huge. And I can't believe it, but I'm the only person at this point, to my knowledge, telling it. I don't know why that is. Is it because I'm wrong? Oh, no, I'm right. But maybe many people's minds don't work this way. I don't really know, nor do I sit around and think about it. I have a job to do, and as I told you, this is the final. I mean, I suppose I could write a book on mind control next to show how they do this in detail, but I would rather leave some things to others and write some other things.
And Elana, I like how you threw out the name Catherine Austin Fitts, because she's one of the early ones that I heard talk about the vaccines correlating to software updates and computers, and the research that you've just laid out for listeners is, you've just brought it full circle, and very well said there. As we wind down here, last couple moments. And again, thank you for joining the show. If you are able to, just if you are able to, Elana, I think a lot of listeners would like your perspective or your view on how would you define global elites? How is that defined for you?
To me, they're bloodlines. And I first awoke to what they are through I don't know, that you may be too young to remember, I don't know, but in the 90s, there was a scandal in Belgium. It's often called the Dutroux scandal. And Marc Dutroux was sort of another Epstein. He was a pimp for the rich and powerful. And he was stealing children off the streets and taking them to castles of very wealthy, old bloodline people. And these children were used there and often murdered in ritual. So I found this one site which did a fantastic job of digging into every crevice they could find. And it was there that I discovered that most of these castles were owned by big pharma corporations. And I knew about big pharma from World War. I'd done a lot of research on World War II, the Nazis, Operation Paperclip, all that. And big pharma was made out like bandits from World War II, because you tend to think of big pharma as the people making vaccines, making medicines.
Yeah.
No, they also make the chemicals that the jets are spewing. They provide all the chemicals, not just IG Farben during World War II, but every war we've had, every war, they provide all the chemicals for all of it, including DU weapons. They provide chemicals for GMOs, for fertilizers, insecticides. I mean, everything that really in the future this era will be remembered for, and probably not very admired for. And so if you ask me who it is, it's Big Pharma. Big Pharma, I just found out, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, that the mainstream media in America that is so controlled, as you know, and the CIA Operation Mockingbird, it goes all the way back to 1973, and we still have the Mockingbird control over the media. The big pharma corporations support all these, all the major media of America, NBC, ABC, CBS, etc., with, I can't remember the exact percentage, but at least 12%. 12%. So tell me this is not power. Tell me this is just a conspiracy theory about the nice big pharma corporations. No, they're running this whole operation.
And Elana, is this something that transcends the Rockefeller and the Rothschild routes that are becoming so publicized? There's people that are talking about these two families and their foundations more and more all the time. But is this something that's
no, they're bloodline. They're bloodline, and they're shareholders. They're absolutely shareholders. And I mean, I need to bring it to the corporate level beyond the Rockefellers. They've been used ad nauseum. I mean, I'm tired of them. Everybody knows about them. Yes, yes, yes. What about the corporations that go nameless? Try to go and hold a corporation responsible for something. And you're looking at years of litigation, years and years. And they may pay you off, like recently Bayer paid off some of Monsanto's lawsuits to, I don't know how many millions. Peanuts, because the power is in the bloodline, first of all, and then it's in the corporate profits. And these families, they've been made into a conspiracy theory. You bring up the word bloodline right away. People are, have been conditioned to think of it as a conspiracy theory. It's no conspiracy theory. These are generations and generations of corporate people, families completely given wealth and power through what they have done in the past. And it is still going on for, well, I don't know. Conservatively, I would guess close to 1,000 years.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Elana Freeland. Elana, keep up the amazing work. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you're doing when you complete this current project, current book that you're on, and what you dive into next.
Right. Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to it too.
All right. Until next time. Thanks, Elana. Thank you, Elana.
Thank you.